Hello, hello. Welcome back to No Me Callo. I won't stay quiet. I'm your host, Lomelin. And before we begin today, I want us to do something together. Take a breath with me. Inhale, exhale. You'll feel this episode because it confronts you, but it also holds you. And it makes you uncomfortable, but it also frees you. Because yes, this is the last episode of the April series, but it doesn't feel like just any ending. It feels like a closing. That kind that makes you look back and realize how much you've changed. But at the same time, it feels like a beginning, a more honest beginning, more grounded, more yours. And today's episode is called Holding Your Truth Without Asking for Permission. And I don't want you to just hear it, I want you to feel it in your body. Holding your truth without asking for permission. Because that sounds nice when you say it quickly, but when you actually live it, it's something else. Because holding your truth means saying something even if it makes people uncomfortable. Choosing something even if others don't understand it. Being who you are even if not everyone knows how to receive it. And that doesn't always feel empowering. Sometimes, honestly, it feels lonely. It feels confusing. It feels like you're doing the right thing with no applause on the outside. And that's where we often start to doubt, because after everything we talked about this month, boundaries, guilt, the fear of losing connections, the grief that comes with growing, we arrive here at that point where it's no longer about explaining yourself better. It's no longer about finding the perfect words so everyone understands you. And it's no longer about softening your truth to make it easier for others to accept. It becomes something deeper, more uncomfortable, more honest. It becomes about living your truth, even when not everyone understands it. So if something in you is stirring right now, even just a little, even if you can't fully explain it yet, stay, because today we're going to go right into that place. So you know what to do. Get comfortable, grab your coffee, your cafecito, your glass of wine, or a cold beer, and get ready to chismear with me. So there's a moment in this process when you choose something and not everyone understands it. You decide to set a boundary and someone takes it personally. Not as your decision, but as a rejection towards them. You decide to step away from something that no longer feels good, and someone says, "You've changed." And they don't say it as a recognition, they say it as like a complaint. You decide to prioritize your peace, your energy, your time, and someone calls it selfish. And there you are in the middle of all of that, trying to stay grounded, trying to trust what you feel, and trying not to doubt. But if you're honest, also feeling confused. Because inside of you, there's a part that says, this is right for me. But outside, there's no validation. There's no, I understand you. No, you're right. Or I'm proud of you for choosing yourself. Instead, sometimes there's silence, there's distance, there's discomfort. There are versions of you that start to be questioned. And that's more uncomfortable than we like to admit it. Because we grew up believing something very deeply. That if something was right, other people would understand it. That if you're doing the right thing, you wouldn't make people uncomfortable. That if you're a good person, you wouldn't create distance. But honestly, the reality is it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you do what's right for you and someone else still doesn't approve. Sometimes you choose yourself and someone else feels left out. Sometimes you grow and someone else feels uncomfortable with your growth. You're right there. That exact moment, that's where the real internal work begins. Because that's the point where you can no longer depend on the outside to confirm what you already know inside. And that's the point where the question changes. And it's no longer, do they understand me? Now it becomes, can I hold myself even when they don't? And that question hits differently. Because holding yourself, it's not easy. Holding yourself means staying with yourself when everything in you wants to go seek validation. Holding yourself means not moving, even when someone else's silence makes you uncomfortable. Holding yourself means not adjusting your truth just because someone else didn't know how to receive it. So imagine this. You decide to say no to something, maybe something small, something everyday, something you would have said yes before without thinking. And this time, you pause, you breathe, and you say no. Simple, clear, no long explanation. And in that moment, everything shifts. The other person goes quiet, an uncomfortable silence, not neutral, not easy, just silence you can feel. The tone changes, the energy drops, the conversation cuts off. Maybe they don't say anything directly, But you feel it. You feel that micro shift, that subtle something that's no longer flowing the same. And automatically your body reacts. That discomfort in your chest, that, ugh, now what? That small knot in your stomach, and your mind starts going. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should have said it differently. Maybe I need to explain more. Maybe it wasn't that serious. Maybe I should fix it. And without even realizing it, you're no longer with yourself. You're with them, with how they felt, how they received it, and how you can soften it. And that's when the impulse shows up, that familiar one, the automatic one, that learned one, to go back, to add more words, to justify yourself, to soften your truth, to say, it's not that I don't want to, I'm just tired and it's been a long week. Just to make the other person feel better, even if that means betraying yourself again. And this is where I want you to really see it clearly. That moment is the exact point where you often abandon yourself. Not when you say yes, but after you've said no, when you go back to correct your truth. And this episode is where that starts to change. This is where you begin to notice that moment, to stay there, to not move so quickly, to feel the discomfort, but to not rush it to fix it, to let the silence exist without filling it with explanations, and to hold your no, even if it's not received the way you hoped. Because right there, that exact space, that's where something new begins. Not perfect, not comfortable, but real. A different kind of relationship with yourself begins. One where you don't abandon yourself just to keep the peace outside. And that, even if it feels uncomfortable at first, trust me, that's also freedom. Because let's be honest, most of us don't just speak, we over-explain. And not a little, we do it all the time. We explain our decisions, we explain our boundaries, we explain what we feel, we explain why we did what we did, we explain why we didn't do what others expected, as if every part of us needs to come with justification, as if our truth on its own is not enough. And I want you to really notice that, because this is more common than it seems. We say things like, I can't, I've just been super busy, and honestly, I'm just so tired. And I've had so much work, and I haven't been sleeping well. And if you pause it, if you listen closely, you realize something. All of that was extra, because in reality, all you wanted to say was, I can't. But that I can't felt incomplete. It felt risky. It feels like something is missing. And so you fill it up, you dress it up, you soften it up, and you make it more acceptable. And not for you, for the other person. And that's not random. That didn't start yesterday. It comes from much more deeper. It comes from growing up in spaces where being understood was the way to be accepted. Where if you didn't explain yourself well, you were misunderstood. Where if you didn't give enough reasons, you were seen as selfish. Where if you said no without justification, you were made to feel guilty. And slowly, without even realizing it, you learned something. You learned that your truth couldn't stand alone, that it had to come with explanations, with reasons, with context, with softness. And you learned that you had to translate yourself so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. And that became automatic, so automatic that you don't even question it anymore. You just do it. You over-explain. You over-explain when no one asks you to do so. You over-explain before anyone even questions you. You over-explain to avoid conflict, to avoid discomfort, to feel at ease, even though deep down, you're not. And here's where I want you to look at this with honesty, but also at the same time with compassion. This was a form of emotional survival because it helped you at some point. It helped you maintain connections. It helped you avoid rejection, and it helped you feel like you belonged. But today, that same thing is disconnecting you from yourself. Because every time you over-explain and every time you justify something you already know is true for you, and every time you soften your boundaries so someone else doesn't feel uncomfortable, you move away from your center. You move away from yourself. And slowly, your peace starts depending on something very unstable. How others receive your truth, whether they understand it, whether they approve it, whether they accept it, and whether they don't get upset. And that, trust me, is so exhausting. Because then you're no longer living from what you feel. You're living from how you think others will receive it. And that is a heavy burden. Because you can never fully control that. You can never guarantee someone will understand. You can never guarantee someone will agree. You can never guarantee someone won't feel uncomfortable. So you adapt, you adjust, you explain more, and you shrink yourself. And still, sometimes it's not enough. And that's where something important comes in. Something maybe no one ever taught you, but something you need to hear today. Your truth does not need excessive explanation to be valid. Your no is enough. Your yes is enough. Your decision is enough. Even if someone else doesn't understand it, even if someone else doesn't agree, even if someone else feels uncomfortable, that does not invalidate what you feel. And I know that doesn't feel easy because there is still a part of you that wants to be understood, that wants to avoid conflict, that wants to keep peace outside. But today, I want to invite you to do something different, to try what it feels like to speak your truth without over explaining it, to notice the discomfort, but not rush it to fill it, to stay in that space where your voice is clear, even if it isn't softened. Because there, right there, is where something new begins. A relationship with yourself that is more honest, more grounded, and more yours. And here, this is where it gets hard, but also where it becomes the most powerful. Because holding your truth doesn't mean everything suddenly feels clear, safe, or comfortable. No. Holding your truth does not remove discomfort. You're gonna feel it, and strongly. You're gonna feel doubt, that little voice that says, what if I'm wrong? And you're gonna feel guilt, that tight feeling in your chest that makes you think, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I'm thinking too much about myself. And you're gonna feel that impulse, so automatic, so familiar, to go back to what you already know, to what you already know how to handle, to what creates less discomfort outside of you. Because what's familiar, even if it's not healthy, even if it's not fair to you, feels easier. But holding yourself is not about eliminating all of that. Holding yourself is staying with yourself despite all of that. It's that moment where you say, yes, this feels uncomfortable. Yes, this is stirring something in me. Yes, not everyone understands it, but still, I'm not abandoning myself. And it's telling yourself, even if this is uncomfortable, I stay with me. Even if someone doesn't understand it, I won't betray myself. And that sounds simple when you hear it. But when you live it, it's a completely different story. Because no one taught us how to do that. We were taught to adapt. We were taught to read the room. We were taught to adjust who we are so something feels okay on the outside. But we were not taught to stay with ourselves when that creates discomfort in others. And that's why it feels so unfamiliar, so new, and so unstable, but also so necessary. Because if you don't learn how to hold yourself, you will always go back. You will always return to explaining, to justifying, to softening, to shrinking yourself. And slowly, you'll lose yourself again. And I want to bring this into something real, because this doesn't only happen in big life moments. It happens in everyday things. Maybe you chose a different professional path, something that actually excites you, something that feels more aligned with you, more you, but your family doesn't understand it. And then the questions come, the comments, the looks. Are you sure? That's not very stable. I wouldn't do that. And you feel it, that pressure to explain, to justify why it makes sense to you, to convince them, to make them feel calm so you can feel calm. Or maybe you decide to end a relationship that wasn't good for you anymore, but it wasn't that bad from the outside. And your friends say, but you looked good together, but it wasn't that serious. Maybe you're overthinking it. And again, you find yourself in that place where you know what you feel, but you don't know how to hold it when it's not validated from the outside. Or maybe you just start changing, setting boundaries, speaking up more, not staying quiet anymore. And someone says, you've changed. And that phrase hits because a part of you wants to say, of course I've changed. I've been working on myself. I've grown. That's the point. But another part of you activates and it starts wondering, what if that's a bad thing? What if I'm going too far? What if I'm losing people? And instead of holding yourself, you start explaining. You begin justifying, softening what you said, adjusting your truth so it doesn't feel as uncomfortable for others. You try to make everyone understand. You try to make sure no one feels bad. You try to keep everything calm, even if inside you're shifting. And in the end, you're exhausted because living by constantly explaining yourself is so draining. It's exhausting to constantly translate what you feel. It's exhausting to measure every word. And it's exhausting to think, how can I say this so they don't take it the wrong way? And it's exhausting to not simply be clear, direct, honest, without feeling like you have to compensate afterward. And here's where I want to ask you something. How much energy are you spending on being understood instead of being true to yourself? Because when you start holding yourself, something shifts. Not immediately outside, but inside, yes. You start feeling more stability, more clarity, more peace with yourself. Not perfect, but more real. Because you're no longer moving as much, no longer negotiating yourself as much, no longer abandoning yourself so easily. And that changes everything, even if at first it feels uncomfortable. And here, this is where everything shifts, but only if you truly integrate it. It will change the way you relate to yourself and to everything else. Because I want you to really hear this, not just with your mind, but with your body. You did not come here to be understood by everyone. And I know that can feel uncomfortable because a part of you wants to be understood, wants someone to say, yes, I completely understand you. What you did makes sense. I would have done the same. Because that brings comfort, that validates, that calms. Because we want connection, we want belonging, and we want to feel like we're not alone in what we feel. And that is human. There's nothing wrong with that. But here's the difficult part, the part we're not always told. Belonging should not cost you your truth. It should not cost you what you feel. It should not cost you what you need. And it should not cost what you know deep down is right for you. Because if in order to belong, you have to constantly explain yourself, soften what you say, shrink what you feel, silence parts of who you are, then I promise you that is not belonging. That is adaptation. And constant adaptation is exhausting because it disconnects you, it drains you, and slowly it pulls you away from yourself. And here's where I want you to see it clearly. Maybe you don't need everyone to understand you. Maybe what you need is to learn how to hold yourself even when they don't. And that changes the question, because for a long time, the question was, do they understand me? Do they agree? Am I doing this right according to others? And without even realizing it, you started living from that place, making decisions based on how they would receive them, measuring your words to avoid discomfort, adjusting your truth to make it fit better. But today, I want to invite you to do something different, to change the question. It is not, do they understand me? It is, am I respecting myself? And it is not, do they agree? It is, am I being honest with myself? And I want you to sit with that for a second, because it sounds simple, but it's not. Because respecting yourself sometimes creates discomfort. Being honest with yourself sometimes creates distance. Choosing yourself does not always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with silence, with strange looks, with uncomfortable questions. But it also comes with something that cannot be replaced, peace. Not the peace of everything being okay outside, but the peace of knowing you are okay with yourself, that you did not betray yourself, that you did not abandon yourself, that you did not over-explain yourself just to be accepted. And that is worth so much. Because at the end of the day, when everything settles, when you are alone with yourself, the question is not, did everyone understand me? The question is, did I leave myself or did I stay with myself? And that changes everything, because your peace, your stability, your relationship with yourself is worth more than being understood by everyone. And as always, I want to recommend a book to you, and it's called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And this book is about how to free yourself from the constant need for external approval and learn to live from your truth without betraying yourself. This episode is about holding your truth without asking for permission. And one of the most important agreements in the book is don't take anything personally. Because when someone doesn't understand your decisions, when someone feels uncomfortable with your boundaries, and when someone reacts to your growth or change, it doesn't always have to be about you. It has to do with their own expectations, their wounds, and their way of seeing the world. And that changes everything. And it also talks about being impeccable with your words, not just with others, but with yourself. About stopping the habit of betraying yourself just to fit in, and about letting go of living from the fear of rejection. So in simple words, this book helps you understand that you don't need everyone to agree with you in order to be at peace with yourself. And that is exactly the heart of this episode. So I highly recommend it. And I want to close this episode with you like this, not as a perfect ending, not as a pretty final line, but as a real conversation, the kind that stays with you long after it ends. And I want you to imagine we're sitting together, no rush, no noise, just you and me speaking honestly, sin pelos en la lengua, as I say. You don't have to explain yourself to be valid. Really. You don't have to find the perfect words. You don't have to give 1,000 reasons. You don't have to convince anyone for what you feel to be enough. You don't have to soften your truth to be accepted. You don't have to lower your voice. You don't have to make your no more comfortable. You don't have to edit who you are just to make someone else feel better. And you also don't have to abandon yourself to belong, because that you've done it before and you know how it feels. It feels like being surrounded by people but far away from yourself. It feels like saying yes when you wanted to say no. It feels like smiling when something inside you is not okay. And if this series made anything clear, it's that you don't want to live like that anymore. And yes, there is also something true here. Some people simply won't understand. They won't understand your decisions, your changes, and your boundaries. And that can hurt. It can hurt more than you expect. It can make you doubt yourself. It can make you want to go back just to feel accompanied again. But listen to me. That does not mean you are wrong. And it does not mean you're going too far, or that you're asking for too much, or you're becoming difficult. It means something much simpler, but also much deeper. It means you're being honest with yourself. And being honest with yourself is not always comfortable, but it is real. So I want you to hold on to this, not just as a phrase, but as something you can come back when you need it. If you can, write it down, save it, and repeat it. Today, I choose myself, even if not everyone understands it. Today, I hold myself, even if it feels uncomfortable. Today, I stop over-explaining, because I am no longer abandoning myself. And if today feels hard, if today still hurts a little, if today you still have doubt, that's okay. It's okay. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to feel fully ready, and you don't have to have everything figured out yet. You only need one thing, not to leave yourself, to stay with yourself, even if you're shaky. Because this moment you're in, this place you find yourself in, is not the end of anything. It's actually the beginning of a relationship with yourself, more honest, more grounded, more free. The beginning of a life where you no longer explain yourself to exist, where you no longer shrink to belong, where you no longer abandon yourself to be loved. And that, even if it feels uncomfortable at first, is also peace. In the description of this episode, you'll find the Amazon link with the full list of books mentioned in No Me Callo, I Won't Stay Quiet, from the very first episode to today's. And don't forget that every Friday there's a new episode waiting for you. We're starting a new month, so you already know. We're coming in with a new series, but this one is going to be a little bit different. There are things we do every single day that we never say out loud. And not because they're dark, not because they're deep, but because they're simply too human. From small decisions, impulses, habits, things we all do and no one really wants to admit. And if I'm honest with you, I'm on that list too. So this month, I want to do something different here on the podcast. Less traditional, more unfiltered. So throughout the entire month of May, we're going to talk about those things we all do, but nobody admits. So welcome to the new series, Things We Do and No One Admits. And to start episode number 1 of this series, we're beginning with one of the most common ones. Faking like you don't care when you clearly do. And the funny thing is, it doesn't just happen once in your life. It happens all the time. It happens when you see a message and decide not to open it yet. It happens when you already read it, but you still act like you're busy. It happens when you act normal in front of someone who deep down shakes you more than you want to admit. Because we've all been there. In that uncomfortable split second between what we feel and what we show. And that small moment where the heart goes in one direction, but the behavior goes in a completely different one. And then we do what we do best. We calm ourselves from the outside. We breathe like nothing happened. We respond like nothing happened. We laugh like nothing happened. As if something didn't move us. As if it didn't matter. As if it didn't mean more than we're willing to admit. But it does matter. It matters more than we say. It matters more than we show. It matters even when we try to convince others, ourselves, that it doesn't. And it's not that we're always lying, it's that sometimes pretending not to feel becomes a way to protect ourselves. Do not overcomplicate things. Do not open something we're not ready to handle yet. But what we don't say still gets felt. What we avoid still affects us, and what we ignore still stays with us. So in this first episode, we're going to talk about that. All those silence ways we act like nothing is happening, when in reality, everything is. So don't miss it. You were listening to No Me Callo, I Won't Stay Quiet. I'm your host, Jessica Lomelin. Until next time.